This podcast contains explicit content and is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Don't say we didn't warn you.
What up, knockers? I'm Madison.
And I'm Hannah.
And you're listening to Who's Knocking?
A true crime podcast.
Mm-hmm. Today, we're going to be doing part 4 of our 4-part series on Charles Sobhraj.
Yes.
This is, in my opinion, the most interesting part. It has to do with the trial and the takedown, etc., etc. I won't get into it because I don't want to spoil it. But I'm excited for it. Hannah, are you excited for it?
Super excited.
Okay. To improve our intros, I'm going to give you a little question today. Hopefully you guys can start to get to know us over these little intros. We won't take up too much time, but Hannah, because I actually don't know this about you, but in terms of in like when you started getting into true crime and stuff, like what was the first case that you remember like listening to? I guess we didn't really podcast back then, but like or reading about or whatever. What was the first one that piqued your interest?
It might have been the West Memphis 3 when we watched the Paradise Lost documentaries. I mean, I definitely...
It had to be before that because Paradise Lost was after high school.
Yeah. That's the first one I remember, though.
Yeah.
I probably had heard of serial killers before then, but I don't think I really ever dove deep into a case.
No? Like, what about Charles Manson?
I don't know.
Before?
That's what I'm trying to remember. Was that before? Or was Serial before?
Oh God, I don't even know when Serial was, but I feel like Serial was after. I don't think it happened. I don't think Serial was when we were in high school.
We watched Paradise Lost. It was New Year's Eve. That was our New Year's activity. And it was after we had graduated, for sure. I think it might have been the first year after we graduated. Is that right? Yeah.
No, it couldn't have been because I was.
No, it was this. It was the second year after we had graduated. Yeah. And we thought, what a great way to celebrate the new year. Let's watch all 3 Paradise Lost documentaries. Yeah. And it was better than all the years I spent like vomiting because of how drunk I was on New Year's.
True. I agree. Yeah. And I wish I could still spend every New Year's like that.
Yeah, honestly, it's the ideal New Year's. But yeah, I think that might have been the first one. That was one of the first deep dives. I mean, we both read Helter Skelter, which now is like chronically outdated, apparently, but that might have been after.
That was going to be such an interesting episode whenever we get to that. When I get around to reading that other book. For anybody, I don't know. Because I don't know that it's like super well. And I don't even know like if we trust that guy, but there's a guy named Tom O'Neill, for anybody who's interested, he was on the Joe Rogan podcast and he wrote this book and it took him like 20 years to write. And he basically disputes a lot of the shit in Helter Skelter. He seems to take down Vincent Bugliosi.
But a lot of people dispute Helter Skelter and don't necessarily make his argument.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah. A lot of people just say that essentially like the Manson murders took place because I forget the exact names, but they had murdered one drug dealer who was black and then got involved.
The Black
and
Panther thing?
Yeah. And they were trying to basically just like cover that up.
That's what the Helter Skelter thing was, wasn't it?
Yeah. But the Helter Skelter theory was saying that they wanted to start a race war, or incite a race war. They were going to hide in the desert, all this stuff, and that was all kind of bullshit. It was just like they wanted to seem like they wanted to seem like there was like some racial activity involved.
Right.
But there wasn't really. And also, like, people argue whether Charles Manson was really so much of an inciting factor in the violence, or whether it was Tex, because Tex seems super fucked up. But yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, Tex does seem pretty fucked. I mean, he's around. I think he's still alive.
Yeah, he's like really religious now and stuff.
Oh yeah, aren't they all?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, if anyone's interested, the first one that I really got into was Eileen Moranos.
Oh yeah.
After I watched Monster when I was in high school, and I was like, what? Fun fact. Okay.
Yeah, that's a pretty crazy one. Oh, you're not going to talk about it?
Well, most people know about her. She is a sex worker who killed like 8 Johns and they killed her. And
but people say it was because
her.
she was so badly abused her whole life.
She had a horrific childhood. She's one of the worst childhoods I've ever
heard.
But you can't go around killing people. So
I mean, I don't know. When all that shit happens to you, like, how do you turn out normal?
You don't, but I think this is a thing that we will probably continue to like talk about and like go back and forth on, because you can't do that. You can't do that.
I know, but if you've been socialized your whole life that like people abuse you, people are violent, people will take advantage of you, and that's how you see the whole world, like how could you not turn out that way?
I think a lot of people have horrible childhoods and don't.
But she like lived her whole life outside of society. Like she never had anybody stand up for her. She only had every person that was supposed to be looking out for her abuse her. So
no, she had a girlfriend in the end, and she was loyal to her until she turned on her. But that was after she was killing people.
Yeah, but that's still like past her formative years.
I think like her childhood clearly explains what she did.
Yeah.
And I don't think she should have been executed also.
Interesting.
I think she was.
You think she could have been rehabilitated, or you think she should have just been like held in prison?
No, I think that she wasn't in her right mind. And like you can't execute people if they're not like completely psychologically sound. I don't know what the term is. I forget what the term is, but she definitely wasn't. When she was on death row, she was talking about aliens and stuff. Like she had some severe psychological problems, and you can't.
So what do you think the solution should be? Like her staying in jail, or?
Yeah. She should have got life. She killed like 8 people.
Yeah.
At a certain point, like you can't have these people in society.
Right. But do you think like the rehabilitation stuff is possible?
Not for a certain segment. No, I don't.
Interesting.
I think that maybe they get to a point where they're like so old that they like physically can't hurt anybody, or like maybe you reasonably could monitor them, but no, it's not worth the risk to innocent people.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
Especially if you're positive that they did such horrible crimes.
I always wonder like what makes people decide someone's rehabilitated, because a lot of murderers are released being said that they're rehabilitated, and it's like how can you be sure? Like,
yeah, I don't know, because it's some people are good at like faking that they're fine.
That's terrifying,
and you never really know.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, how do you trust that person? Shout out the Greyhound bus murder. He's just like living his life, and it's like he really terrifyingly murdered somebody, and he's just like
would you want to live around that guy? I wouldn't.
No. No. I really wouldn't.
Would you want to get on a bus with that guy?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, the guy, for anyone who doesn't know, is the guy in Canada who
shout out Canada,
beheaded another person on a Greyhound bus.
A random person.
And that guy
who he got up and sat next to at a rest stop and was like just hacking away at him and ate parts of him. And
he's just ootin' a boot now.
Yeah.
Canadian style.
But the thing is
like, that's fine.
Yeah, it's cool. It's fine. But the thing is, like, they specifically, like, he wasn't sent to jail. He was sent to a psychiatric hospital, and they specifically were like, he's good now. Go on free. Like, they assessed him to decide that. And I don't know, like, maybe he is, because apparently he was having like some type of psychotic break, but it's like, how are you sure? Yeah, how are you sure? Like the risk is great.
Parole people or whoever's making that decision, would you let him babysit your kids? Would you let him like near your kid's school?
I don't know. Yeah.
Anyway, we could get pretty far in that, but let us begin.
Okay.
So we don't go too far. So I will start with a recap of the previous episode, a generous recap. Yep. Here we go. So last episode, we started with the murder of Stephanie Perry, who Charles and Ajay tied to a tree and strangled to death, if we recall.
Right.
She just very unfortunately seemed to have stumbled into this situation. As we recall, it was during Vitali's pre-death, during the torture of him and interrogation by Charles, that he revealed Stephanie's name. And then she ended up calling, and he's like, oh, perfect, I'll go kill you. So Um, after their deaths, the guys at the apartment started putting things together, and they decided to get out of Bangkok. That was a big thing. And with the help of Nadine and Remy, they borrowed some money, they got new passports, and they headed back to France.
Okay.
And then we never heard from Yannick again, which was really sketchy.
Yeah, kind of fair though.
Yeah, I don't know. As that was going down, Charles, Marie-Andre, and Ajay were in Kathmandu murdering Connie and Laurent, a Canadian and American pair of backpackers. Nadine and Remy did their best to sound the alarm on Charles, and finally someone started listening to them. This man was Herman Nippenberg and his colleague Paul Simon. Okay. They started looking into everything and getting the corrupt Thai police involved. They raided Charles's apartment, and the three of them, Charles, Marie-Andre, and Ajay, were taken away for questioning, but they didn't keep them long enough, and soon they fled the country. They were in Malaysia for a bit. Whatever, they escaped. So we're in the year 1976. So it was about a month after the raid. Nadine received a postcard from Charles. It appeared to have been mailed from Switzerland. We don't know if this was a red herring or not, but that's where it seemed to have been mailed from. And it said, quote, "I haven't forgotten you, and I will see you again soon. I hope, my dear Nadine, I will be able to show my gratitude. Love, Alain." And I would have shit myself if I received that in the mail from this scary, scary man.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, the other, Charles, and this is where we lose Ajay. Nobody knows where the fuck he went.
Do you think he escaped and just fucked off?
So there's theories. Everybody kind of thinks that Charles killed him.
That's what I was wondering.
In the series, the BBC series, they like do a scene where he kills him.
Oh. But it's not proven.
It's not proven. They've just never found him. Marie-Andre,
so creepy,
does like allude to that happening, but we don't like. I don't even know if she knows. She probably she could have just assumed. We don't know.
Right.
So in France, the French had put 2 and 2 together in regards to Stephanie Perry, and they had started. They went and questioned Nadine about her. And they were pretty rude about it, and they like accused her of being one of Charles' accomplices.
Damn.
One of Charles's accomplices, and like it got pretty heated. But I think in the end they like figured out that she wasn't. And then at this point, Interpol was involved, but tracking down Charles was proving to be very difficult. But so I guess how Interpol works is like the international police, and then like every separate country or city has
I literally just put that together.
International police.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Interpol is really important here because these are crimes that take place in so many different countries.
Yeah.
So like that's the only way that they can kind of collectively come together.
Right.
So on the day that Herman and Angela returned from their trip, they went on a vacation because the ambassador was like, you need to step back and take a break, go take a vacation. So they went on a vacation, they came home, and they learned that the owner of the Canet house where Charles had his apartments, the owner of that apartment complex was going to start selling off the contents of Charles's 2 apartments. And Herman was not having this because he knew that there was still some stuff left over. Even though the Thai police had gone through it, he did not trust that they went through it properly, and he was correct. And so he arranged for some agents and Nadine and Remy to go and take any leftover evidence. And they found a lot of stuff. They found a bunch of Hank and Cocky's items that they were pretty certain belonged to them because they were seen in the photos that they had of them and described in the letters. There was clothing, there was a bag, there was a sewing kit, and there was this Chinese fan that they had just gotten back from Hong Kong. And I believe there was either a photo of it or was mentioned in a photo.
Okay.
Also, there were some DEA agents there, American DEA agents, and they had also become involved because of the 2 American citizens and the link of the like heroin drug trade. And so during their search, they found hundreds of travel documents from all of the people that Charles had interacted with, which the Thai police why did the Thai police not take all that stuff?
Yeah, but don't they just not care?
That's what's like, how incompetent are you? My God. And they also found this large arsenal of pharmaceutical stuff, all the drugs that they had.
Yeah.
Including and I looked into this, I like tried to find multiple sources because I'm like, that is so much, but 10 kilograms. So not 10 pounds, 10 kilograms of itching powder.
Yeah, like why do you have that?
That is so much itching powder.
Which, yeah.
I guess
what even is itching powder?
It's like powder that when it touches you, it makes you itchy.
Okay. What's the purpose of that?
To like make people think they're itchy. Like I guess to make them think they're like allergic to something. But I don't know where in the story he was like putting itching powder on people.
Yeah.
And that is so much itching powder.
I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah, that seems like a lot of it. Okay.
One of the most shocking and interesting discoveries was made by Angela.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Marie André's diary.
Oh, there's some incriminating shit in there.
Yes. And it included a detailed travel log of all their travels.
Okay.
Plus just like all her thoughts and feelings. Because remember, she was like super unhappy and had no friends. So, and obviously it was mostly about Charles. And it was
right.
It was very like sad and pathetic.
Damn.
So here's a nice little quote from it. Quote, "He is the only man who can help me, for I love him so much that I can only make one being with him. I can only exist because of him. I can only breathe because of him. And my love is increasing." End quote.
Okay.
I don't know much about like what went on in her childhood and her life, but it's like, my God, this woman, like every source or like every person who met her was just like, she's like not a person. She just like lives for Charles and like he just treats her like crap. And she just like, I don't know what the deal with her is because she's just very sad and pathetic.
It is so sad, and like he's just such a bad guy to her. It's just
yeah. Also, within the diary, there was a bunch of photos, including one of Charles lying on a bed naked with a giant erection.
Of course there was.
Which is so disgusting.
Yeah, that's kind of disturbing. But honestly, that's probably what kept them together, realistically.
I mean, he clearly, like, that just, to me, exemplifies, like, that's, like, his personality in a photo.
Yeah.
Like,
everyone wants this.
So disgusting. Anyway.
It's creepy.
I also find it really interesting that Marie André left this behind.
Okay.
I never found an explanation for it. I think either it's possible that like they just got out of there in such a haste, but I mean, the last time they were at the apartment, they knew that they were going to be going to the police station, and then they like left later after that. But like, why would she leave that there? It's so incriminating.
Yeah. Well, I think she probably didn't want him to know she had it, right?
I don't know. I don't know if she knew he had it. I mean, she must not have, because literally it's so incriminating.
Yeah.
And then then the other possibility, or one of the other possibilities, is that she left it intentionally, wanting to get caught.
That's I don't know. I would say.
Also, apparently, like Ajay, they said, was left there to like get rid of items. And if that's really the case, he did a really bad job.
Yeah.
Getting rid of the items. And like, did he not see that book?
Yeah.
I don't know if it was hidden like super, like it was found.
Right.
So it wasn't like, crazy hidden. Anyway, that's a very big question for me. Okay. So meanwhile, it is April of 1976. And on April 12th, news started to come out about the murders on Freak Street in Kathmandu. And sources were saying that these murders were linked to the Hong Kong heroin trade. But to this day, these sources have never been confirmed or revealed. Okay. Things were just all over the place. The Thai police had clearly fucked up letting these guys go amongst a slew of hard evidence that was becoming very obvious. Charles was still being spoken of as Alain Gauthier, which was a huge issue because it made it really impossible for them to find him. And finally, Herman's boss was like, okay, go to the media, go for it. On May 9th of 1976, the Bangkok Post put out a story titled Web of Death, featuring the five known murder victims, as well as photos of Charles, Marie-Andre, and I think Ajay as well. And they were labeled as Alain Gauthier and Marie-Andre Leclerc. Okay. At least one of their names was correct. And I think where they got her name, it possibly could have been from the diary, but also she had told Nadine her name. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where they got that. Okay. So now that they had figured out her name, Canada had been notified of everything concerning Marie-Andre. Okay. And they sent the good old Royal Canadian Mounted Police to go visit her parents.
Okay.
Leclerc's. And they did find quite a crucial piece of information there, although they didn't know at the time that it was important, but soon they would. Apparently, Marie-Andre had instructed her parents that in the event of an emergency or something happened, for them to contact Madame Sobhraj of Villa La Roche, which I guess is Charles's mom's name, but like, why is she still taking the Sobhraj last name? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe she never changed it.
Yeah, I guess that's the case. But so this would end up being the key to finding Charles's true identity.
Okay.
Although that did not happen immediately, because nothing happens immediately in the story when it comes to the police. So while all of this was going on in Thailand, Charles and Marie-Andre, excuse me, they were in Paris. And Charles's first stop was to see his ex-wife, Chantal, of course.
Sure.
She was living in the United States with her husband, her new husband, but she was back in town because her mother was dying. So she was visiting. Charles staked out her house, waited for everybody else to leave, so waited until he was sure that only Chantal was home. Mm-hmm. And then he just paid her this creepy little visit. He pretty much just went in and told her that he had made the biggest mistake by losing her.
Oh, come on.
Bullshit. And then he just left, and was super weird about it. And super cool for Marie-Andre, who was like stupidly but very loyally following him all over the place and doing whatever he wanted, and he's just like off, and he's like, I made a mistake.
Yeah, it's kind of bad for everyone.
Yeah. And then they also stopped in to see Felix. Okay. And Charles made this huge show. He brought this big bag of like rubies or some sort of gem, and he was like, here, pick one for your mother. And Felix was like, that was so tacky. Like, if he wanted to give me a gem, he should have chosen one himself. And like, he just saw through the entire facade and just was like, this is bullshit. And Marie-Andre was there, and he found her to be super awkward and weird because she just sat there being really obviously really sad and drinking coffee. So he's like, this whole situation is just super weird and I don't like it. But he still was, nice to him or whatever. Okay. And at this time, Charles and Marie-Andre spent time with Charles's mother. Mm-hmm. And Marie-Andre would later be like, that was super weird because they have a really bad relationship and they just like fought the whole time, and it was really weird. But in May, all of this news started coming out in Asia, and it didn't quite make it to Europe at the exact same time, but it followed very, very soon after. And so while they were in Paris, Charles and Marie-Andre were visiting with this French guy. He was a high-ranking police officer and his wife, and they had met a couple times while they were there. They had met them in Singapore, and they had all gotten along really well, and Charles had been selling them jewels and stuff. And I guess they never ended up becoming one of his robbery victims, maybe because he thought that he could get more long-term stuff out of this guy because he was buying like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of jewels from him. But so one day they went over to discuss whatever deal they were doing, and the guy was like giving off a really weird vibe, and Charles suspected something was off. And then the guy pulled out the newspaper and was like, what's up with this, you guys? Because their photos are on it and they're suspected of multiple murders. And so Charles just launched into this huge story about how...
Did Charles know at that point that
I think
that information was out there?
I think he did. And he was trying really hard to keep it from Marie-Andre.
Oh my God.
But then this guy's like, hey, what the fuck?
Yet another thing in this case that would not happen in the internet era.
No, this would be on everybody's phones instantly.
Yeah.
So Charles just went into this huge story, and he's like, business is really dirty in Asia and everyone there is a liar and they hated him because he just gets such good deals. So like nobody can compete with him. And so he's like, everybody's just always making up shit about me. And the guy seemed to believe him, especially because the guy had called Interpol, but due to some sort of failure of like sending files and stuff, the name Alain Gauthier was not yet in their files.
Okay.
So like he could have been arrested right there. They could have sent somebody over right there had that name got there. But again, they're working with like paper files and like sending messages.
Right.
It's just bullshit.
Telegraphs.
It's so hard for somebody of this era to look back and be like, what the fuck? Finally, when the Paris Interpol started making a bunch of inquiries to the Bangkok Interpol regarding Stephanie Perry's death, because remember, they had started looking into Stephanie Perry's death, the head of the Bangkok Interpol then began to get really curious about all this, what was going on.
Okay.
So he spoke to Herman and Nadine and Remy, and he interviewed some of the like documented survivors of Charles and friends. And he poured over all the evidence, all the stuff that was left at the Cannet House and Herman's big report. And at the time, also while this was going on, it's just like all these things are happening at the exact same time. The family members of Laurent Carrière, Teresa Knowlton, and Vitaly Hakim were all making positive identifications of their loved ones.
Okay.
That had all come together and they were all going down to Nepal and Thailand. And apparently, this is just a side note that's just so sad. Apparently, so all of them had been buried because they had been buried before we knew who they were.
Okay.
Although, yeah, those ones, they didn't know who they were before they buried them. And apparently when they were exhuming the body of Vitaly right in front of his dad, his head just fell off. Can you imagine?
There's nothing in general that I would less like to see than an exhumed body, to be honest.
That's head just rolls off.
Or one that like of somebody that I know. Head on, head off. It doesn't even matter. Like that's already bad. But yeah, that's bad.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
So
why do they have to do it in front of his dad?
I think they just did that because they came down. I have no idea why they did a lot of the things they did, especially, I don't know, I'm like practices in, I guess that would have been Thailand in 1976.
Right.
Who knows?
Okay.
So on May 19th, the Paris Interpol cabled this message to Bangkok. Quote, excuse me. The discrete verification of the address Villa La Roche shows that Tran Sobhraj, ex-concubine of Hochin Sobhraj, is living there. Tran had 2 children by Sobhraj. One of them, a son, is recorded in our documents under diverse identities, including Charles Sobhraj. This is where they get the name.
Okay.
This hostile individual, understatement, is known for
I'll say
is known for escaping and is under indictment in France. It appears that Charles Sobhraj took the identity of Gauthier Alain and is considered an urgent and grave affair in France. End quote.
Okay.
So finally, after all the cards had fallen into place, a warrant went out with a detailed physical descriptions and the correct names for the arrests of Charles Sobhraj, Marie-André Leclerc, and Ajay Chowdhury.
Okay.
Who were wanted for conspiring to murder Teresa Knowlton, Vitaly Hakim, Hank Bintanha, and Cocky Hanker. And this warrant called for their extradition to Thailand immediately.
Okay.
So finally, that's out there.
Cool.
So upon all of this coming out, Charles knew that they had to get out of France. So he and Marie-André and this other man named Jean Dusme,
okay,
Dhuisme, you know, he was some sort of real estate dealer who had somehow gotten himself roped into all of this. I'm like, Charles met him and roped him in, I'm sure. So those 3 made their way back to Bombay, India. When they were there, Charles met a Belgian man named Jean Huygens, Huygens, And he was just like a kind of down and out guy looking for work to feed his family. He's a Belgian guy in India. He was missing a bunch of teeth. I don't know, random.
Okay.
Charles initially,
picture.
Yeah, that's what he looked like. That's what they said in the book. But Charles initially asked him to help him like find passports, and asked if he knew any good looking women he could also recruit. So Jean was like, all right, I'll do this. Fine. And he introduced Charles to a British woman named Barbara. Charles was once again out of money and low on resources, and now on the run again. And so he had these plans to pull off this really big robbery and hopefully make a bunch of money all in one go so that he could continue on and hide or whatever. So leading up to these plans, he needed cash and passports. Remember, he's like starting all over again. So he needs lots of passports. So he used these new friends he'd met, as well as Jean and Mary, who had also joined them. If we recall, Mary is the one who they met in Malaysia. I don't remember if it's Malaysia or if it was India, but she was the one who way back in the day, many episodes ago, gave him the cologne that he used to set fire to that van or whatever. So she's just like some like loyal ass lady who just like keeps showing up and being helpful. Fine.
Yeah.
So Jean and Mary, they had also joined, and they went on to drug and rob a man named Luke Solomon in India. 2 days after Luke was drugged and left in his hotel room, he was found and he was brought to a hospital where he later died on July 2nd, 1976. This is another case where they didn't mean to kill him, but he did end up dying, and horrible.
Yeah.
They were robbing him. And then I guess he just didn't take well to the poison or the whatever they gave him.
But it wasn't intentional as far as we know.
As far as we know, no.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess it's questionable.
It's hard to know at this point.
There was like the driver, I think it was pretty obvious that Charles didn't mean to kill him, because it was like more work for him he was annoyed when he found out that the guy was dead. But this one, I think he just didn't give a shit either way.
Right.
So as this was all going down and plans were being laid for some big gem robbery, Marie-Andre started to freak out, and she was secretly making plans to escape. She had seen the articles coming out about them. She knew that this would just all come to a horrible end, and she started hoarding little bits of cash, and she hid it in her lipstick container in her backpack. Nice. And now her backpack housed all the like stolen passports and traveler's checks and stuff. So it was like, that's just where Charles was keeping it at the time. So it was important. The backpack was important. So when Charles was busy, at some point, she made a secret phone call to her parents in Quebec and asked them to send a lawyer to India. And once that had been arranged, she was hopeful that she might be able to get out of this mess. But literally during that phone call, the guy, Jean, who he's started to be like, what have I got myself into? Like this, he didn't mean to get into like murders and all this bullshit. So he was secretly plotting to get out, and he ran off with the entire backpack with all her belongings, as well as all the stolen traveler's checks and passports that they just collected. So like she's trying to fuck him over. He's not trying to fuck him over, but she's trying to leave. And he's like, oh, I got to leave. And then he ends up fucking over her leaving plans. And it's just a big mess. Now, Charles obviously is like upset about this whole situation, the guy leaving and taking all the stuff that he just worked to get. But Charles still had a bunch of gems. But again, he now needed more passports and money if he wanted to complete this robbery that he was planning. And they really wanted, if they're going to escape, they needed passports. And his plan was to go to South America. So Charles and Marie-Andre, they were starting to fight with each other. Even though she knew she wanted to leave him, she was still in love with him in the way that we've been discussing. I keep saying pathetic, and it's because I think that's the most, like, I say that in a way that I kind of feel bad for her, but it's like, to me, it's the most accurate term that I can think of is like,
he's just not returning like what she's giving at all.
Yeah. And like, she's like a dog that's been beaten, like,
yeah, like he's just such a bad guy and she's still staying loyal to him. It's just like,
And just like lapping up all his bullshit. Cause he keeps saying, like, he's being like, as soon as we get out of this problem, like, it's just going to be fine from here. And it's like, that's what he's been telling everybody. Like, since Chantel, he's been like, oh, I'll just like gamble away all our money. But as soon as I do that, like,
it'll be fine. Yeah.
Like, dude, no. And he was getting really annoyed with her attitude. She was being really like depressed and like, wah, wah.
Oh my
obviously. God. And he's like really getting pissed at her. And he knew that she was a liability too. So he kept a really close eye on her. And he also started hitting her.
Oh, and great.
He had never seemed like, there's nowhere that I read at all before this point where he was like physically abusive to her. If anything, like her complaint was that like he was never around and like didn't have sex with her ever. But now he started getting really physically abusive with her.
That's fucked up.
Yeah. So Charles was getting really annoyed and that was all happening, but he came up with a new plan. And this plan is very interesting.
Yeah.
So one day or the next day or whatever, wherever we are, they staked out a bunch of tourist groups at the Taj Mahal. And they got a room at a hotel where they knew one of the groups of French travelers would be staying. French was obviously a good type of person to go for because Charles could speak French and yada, yada. So that night at the hotel, Charles just moseyed on down to the hotel bar and he befriended the tour leader and his wife at the hotel bar. When he got them so interested in all of his stories and his knowledge about Indian history. And like he just like schmoozed them so much that they invited him to have dinner with some of the group. And Charles he schmoozed like he had never schmoozed before. He made friends with as many members of the tour group as he could. And they liked him so much, they asked him to join their tour. And Charles was like, no. He declined. But he's like, you know what? I'll meet you guys in Delhi. So he's
really good at that.
He is. And he knows exactly when to like decline things to make it like not so
you're offering me stuff.
Yes, that's what he does. He tricks people into like inviting him.
Yeah.
And so, okay, that night he started secretly slipping some of them laxatives in their drinks. He talked to them then like throughout the night. He talked to them very extensively about India's drinking water and warned them about how they could get sick and stuff. And gaining trust. Yes, as he's already given them laxatives. Then he gave a bunch of them pills that he said could prevent sickness. Most of them were harmless drugs, but a few of them were laced with laxatives. He wanted the ones who didn't fall ill to think that it was due to the medicine that he'd provided to them. And so so that's like the what he laid out. And there was 60 of them. So potentially his plan to like steal all of their passports would get him 60 passports in one go. So he was very determined and very set on this plan. So that night, Charles and his little gang stayed up in his hotel room, filling up gel capsules with a mixture of laxatives and sleeping pills. And this was like a concoction that he had studied. He'd actually given one of them to Mary to see like what would happen. And he determined that this was the correct concoction for what he was planning.
It just sounds like a terrible thing to take. A really bad combination.
Yeah. And she's just like, okay. Or I don't know if he like slipped it to her or if she like willingly did it. But
so shitty if she willingly did it.
She seems like the type of person who would willingly do it. Yeah. Like, why are you here? But anyway. So a few days later, Charles and all his buds arrived in Delhi, and Charles met up with the French tour group, and he also had Jean with him. Okay. The tour group, the people on the tour, it was their last day in India, and they were very excited to see Charles because they all just loved him so much for no reason. And it was so almost immediately they asked him if he had any more of those pills because of how everything had happened. And some of them had gotten sick and some of them hadn't because they had the sugar pills. And he made this big show of it. He's like, oh no, I don't have any, but my buddy Jean, I can get him to run down into town because there's a doctor I know there. He can give us a bunch. And Jean, why don't you go do that? And so Jean did. And when Jean came back with the pills, Charles handed them out to everyone, telling them to take 1 now and 2 after dinner. And so everybody immediately started taking them. Then a very short while later, like we're talking like minutes, like maybe 10 minutes later, one by one, the tourists started dropping like flies, like right in the hotel lobby.
Oh my God.
Which Charles had not expected. This was an unexpected thing. Some of them passed right out. Some of them were getting dizzy. Some of them were vomiting and shitting their pants. And there were 60 of them. There were 60 of them. So this caused an enormous scene in the middle of the hotel. And then the other one started like, they didn't know what was going on. Some of them immediately started blaming Charles. Charles started like making up all this shit, being like, oh, like, did you guys get vaccines for this? Like maybe it's going along with this. And like, you saw that Jean started freaking out. So he was like, Jean, get out of here. I'll handle this. The hotel management started scrambling and trying to get ambulances, which apparently was not an easy task in Delhi in 1976.
Damn.
The police were called. Some of the tourists who had not taken the pills started calling the French embassy. And Charles very well could have escaped. He could have just walked out, but he was so invested in getting these passports. That's all he wanted. So he stuck around pretending to help and asking them all these questions and stuff. He thought that the passports could have been in like the head tourist guy's bag. So he was like eyeing that bag the whole time, trying to figure out a way he could get the bag. But it was very obvious what was going on. And since the French embassy had been called, the police finally showed up, and there was a couple of the tourists who like either it hadn't affected or if they hadn't taken the pills, and they started like guarding Charles, and they're like, you're not going anywhere. We know what you did.
Wow. Okay.
So finally the police showed up, and Charles was just playing it cool like he usually did. He was very confident that he could talk his way out of this. But unfortunately for him, Deputy Superintendent Naranda Naftali was on the job that night, and he knew exactly who Charles Sobhraj was. He remembered 5 years ago the chaos that he caused at the Ashoka Hotel. If we recall, that was when he held that flamenco dancer hostage and drilled a hole through the floor and got off with $10,000 worth of jewelry. And then he got arrested, and then he faked appendicitis and blah, 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 like that whole thing.
Oh, how could I forget the fake appendicitis?
Yes. And he had been aware that Charles may be back in India because he heard from the Canadian embassy, who heard from Marie André's family when she got in contact with them. And he had also spoken to Jean Hugin, the Belgian man who was working for Charles. But when he took off, he went right to the police, and that's who he ended up speaking to. And so he was waiting for Charles to fuck up so that he could catch him in the act. So when this guy, Tully, had entered the hotel and approached Charles, he lifted his shirt to reveal the appendectomy scar.
God, hate
from
that.
when he faked the appendicitis. And he's like, this is Charles Sobhraj. Arrest this man. We're taking him down. And Tully could not have been more excited to arrest this man. And he did. And it was awesome.
I just never know if it's going to be the real arrest.
No, this is the real arrest.
Okay, there we go.
And like also just don't forget that all these people are just like vomiting and shitting everywhere. Like the whole lobby smells like crap. They all have to,
what did he think was going to happen?
He didn't think it would affect them so quickly. He thought that they would all go back to their rooms and all pass out.
Sick.
And all pass out. And then he could just go to each of the rooms and take their passports. That was the plan.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to calculate like when's it going to take effect. How?
Yeah, that's why he asked them to take 1 now and 1 after dinner. But like, I guess they were just smart. They were all too strong. They put too much in them, and so this should have been this should have been like the quietest thing. Like they just go back to their rooms and just like knock out. But instead, it was just the biggest commotion.
Yeah.
Like,
and with that many people too, you know,
just literally vomit and shit everywhere, and just people passed the fuck out. 60 people.
Right.
And so they like
so many people.
When they took them all to the hospital, there was only 6 available beds. So 54, like they're like, I don't know. What do we do?
Yeah. What do they even do? Okay.
It was just a giant mess, and nobody died. So it's like, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Not funny, but
kind of funny. I mean, yeah.
Anyway, over the next 4 days, the rest of Charles's accomplices were also caught. Obviously, they have only made it this far because Charles knows what he's doing. Nobody is as good at like evading people as Charles is. So like they were just instantly caught. Marie Andre instantly began confessing and implicating Charles and Ajay in all the murders. And as I said before, nobody knew where Ajay was. And she suggested that Charles probably murdered him. And to this day, as I said, nobody knows.
Crazy.
Herman got word in Bangkok that Charles had finally been caught. This was a huge relief for him, as the case had been plaguing him daily. In France, word got out through the papers, and Felix, of course, had been following everything carefully. He received a 15-page letter from Charles in prison, and clearly Charles still felt he could trust this man. Okay. And there was a bit of truth to that. Felix, although greatly disappointed and obviously shocked and frightened by Charles's actions, still maintained that he would stick by his side as he went through the next phase. And he took it seriously. He took seriously the promise that he'd made all those years ago in Poissy prison. And now I'm going to read from the book. Okay, so here is a little excerpt from the 15-page letter.
Okay.
Alain,
it's a pretty long letter.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Felix. The pseudonym that they give to Felix in this book is Aidan. It's kind of random. Felix, perhaps you can understand when I tell you that throughout all of this, I have been searching only for a way to live. And although I was often engaged in illegal activities, sometimes lost my principles, I had certain respect for the human state. I tell you, Felix, I promise you, I did not kill. I am not a liar. Such a lie.
Yeah. Okay.
Totally
believe you.
Yeah. During the few years that Chantal spent with me, she will tell you that she never saw me do any physical harm to anyone. So they are wrong who say that I have committed all those murders for a few hundred or a few $1,000s. As you know, I have never been short of illegal. As you know, I have never been short of illegal ways to make money. Why, during a whole year, I didn't commit a murder, and then in 3 months, 9 or 10 murders all in one blow, in which the profit didn't total more than $5,000. If that were the case, it means I did it not for the money, but simply to kill. So Felix, above all, despite these stupid accusations, I tell you, it is not true. They are all liars, and now I risk the loss of my head. So I have said to myself, my little Charlie, this is serious. It is necessary to play a dangerous game. You can't weaken. You can't let yourself cry, or they will hear you and think you are becoming soft. It is necessary to fight. And
wow. Okay.
So he's just, out here lying.
Yeah.
So at this time, Hotchend had also written to Felix to express his feelings on the matter. Okay. And I found his letter very interesting, and I think you will too. Here's a bit from his letter. And this really gives his dad's perspective, and flawed as it is. So his letter, quote, once a blind boy was sitting on a stone near a pond. All the other boys were swimming, chatting, and laughing. A priest passed by and saw this boy sitting alone. He saw he was blind and took pity on him. The priest prayed to the Almighty God to give him eyes so he could swim too. God agreed and gave the boy light. The boy jumped in the pond for a swim and began to beat the other boys. He's dangerous, they all said, and ran away. The boy came out of the pond and began to beat the priest, who asked God to make the boy like he was before. God did so and said to the priest, I saw the boy was dangerous to humans, so I took away his light. Dear Felix, you have done the same thing with this boy. Let him be in prison rather than let him be freed. This was your great mistake. You thought he would do good when he was freed. He begged you and you took pity on him. This is the result of your mercy.
Wow. So
here Hotchend is blaming somebody else for his son's behavior.
Yeah, I mean, whose fault would it be, I guess?
Which is really funny. So in response to that, Felix sent Hotchend a little Bible. And there, I think you can see the stark difference between these two men's views on human nature, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
I always enjoy like little stories like that to like illustrate a point, even though, I don't agree with the point. But
yeah, it's like reading Carla Homolka's letters.
Yeah.
When she's like, yeah, my parents are such assholes.
it's like you killed your sister, dude. Anyway, so Charles and everyone were in prison. As usual, Charles was thriving.
Of course.
Charles's reputation was well known, and he was highly respected and connected on the inside. His accomplices did not fare as well as him, obviously. The trial took place in 1977, and it was quite the spectacle. This case was highly publicized. It was attended by journalists from all over the world, including Richard Neville and Julie Clark, the co-writers of this book.
Okay.
And they conducted extensive interviews with Charles through the whole event. And they remained in contact with him like through the rest of their lives, basically. Barbara and Mary were also on trial, and they had turned against Charles and were testifying for the prosecution. Although they had flipped, they were still in prison and they were having a very rough time, both apparently attempting suicide. They both overdosed on pills that seemed to have actually been provided by Charles.
Oh, you don't say.
Yeah. And now from this point on, the whole trial and all the information, like, it gets very murky and like difficult to understand, especially like because they were being tried for different things at different times and getting different this and that. So like, hopefully I have what I've put together is the pretty much the truth of the matter, but I'll just say it was really not easy to wade through all the information and come out with this. Like, there's different numbers and all these different sources, and I did my best. So Charles was confident and calm, like usual. He did a lot of press. He seemed to really think that he was going to get out of this. This really reminds me of the Charles Manson trial. And a lot of people actually call him like the Charles Manson of Asia, because a lot of people kind of talk about like his apartment and everything, and like gathering all these other travelers and stuff as like him creating this little family and cult like scenario, whatever. So that's where the comparison comes in. But like Charles Manson, he was like hiring and firing lawyers all over the place and causing a big fuss. He acted like he owned the place. Interestingly, his brother Guy arrived to be with Charles and to try to help him escape. He was just like, "Oh, I'm here for you, brother." Like, over the whole thing where you left me in prison to rot.
Yeah, that's nice.
Which is shocking. By the way, his real name is Andre, if anyone's interested.
Okay.
In the end, Charles ended up representing himself.
Typical, of course.
Which goes so well with his personality.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
And he also started a hunger strike to protest the prison conditions.
What were the prison conditions?
Well, his prison conditions were perfectly fine. Everyone else's seemed to be like really shitty and dirty and nasty and like full of rats and gross. Why
wasn't his that bad?
I'll get to it in a little bit.
Okay.
Like, it's possible that beforehand they weren't great, but like Charles there's no prison in Asia that Charles is going to where he doesn't like know people and is not swindling the shit out of everybody. Mm-hmm. Like, he doesn't get treated.
He knows everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, Marie Andre had remained on his side the entire time. Like, she started saying shit at the beginning, but then like quickly flipped and was just like continued to support him and be in love with him. So Charles and Marie Andre were on trial for the drugging and manslaughter of Luke Solomon. Charles received 7 years for that case, and Marie Andre was acquitted. But then immediately after, they had another trial for the drugging and attempted robbery of the tour group. Charles got an additional 7 years, 5 or 7 years. I don't know which one. So it's totaling around 12 to 14 years. And Marie Andre got a few years for that as well. Okay. Charles and Marie Andre both received life sentences for the robbery and murder of Alan Jacobs. If we recall, I forget what country. I don't remember what country that was. It was, I think, last episode. But in 1983, years later, that conviction was overturned on appeal.
Oh, okay.
But in that year, too, Marie Andre developed terminal ovarian cancer, and she was released early so that she could go home and die. Oh. And in April of 1984, she passed away at her home in Quebec. She died still claiming to be in love with Charles. And near the end...
Really?
Yes. What a waste of a life. Near the end, when asked if Charles was guilty, she replied, quote, "I never saw him kill anyone, but he is..."
Come on.
End quote.
Oh.
Yeah. And she didn't seem to be at any of the murder sites, but it's very interesting. It's very clear that she says, I never saw him kill anyone. She obviously knew he was killing.
Yeah, he definitely was. That's crazy. I wonder if it was one of those things where like she was scared of him and like she kind of acted more obsessed with him than she really was.
I don't know. And I guess we'll never know.
It's hard to say.
Like the thing with Chantel, when Charles ended up just like indoctrinating Chantel to buy into his whole thing that like he was victimized by everybody. And so like all his actions were justified. And that seems to be like, I see this in the statement because she says, but he is sick. And it's basically implying that like he's a bad person, but it's not his fault. And I think that's like kind of how she sees it as well. Yes. And I think it's all these women are like, wow, he had such like a crazy life. And now like, he's just this like magical person and like nothing he does is his fault because this is what happened to him and blah, blah, blah. And I think he's convincing. And I think that's his story. And he really likes to use that story.
That is what those kinds of people say though. You know, like somebody obviously like he did go through bad circumstances, but that is like such an excuse.
Yeah, for murdering people.
Yeah, it's like you're an adult.
Yeah, you didn't have to kill them. Like you just didn't do it. Now, throughout this whole trial, Charles talked a lot and he made a lot of claims. And the biggest being that he was a hitman for the Hong Kong drug trade and he had been hired by them to take out amateur drug dealers. And that was his motive for killing these people. And he confessed over and over to many of the murders and talked about them almost with pride. Like at one point he started just like outright admitting to them. And here is where I'm going to just read a quote. This was Julie Clark, one of the writers of this book, her thoughts upon first meeting Charles, which I thought were very interesting. Quote, it was like meeting a movie star. He gave the impression of being a person of substance and oddly respectability. Later, I misremembered that I took an instant dislike to him, but my journal showed that I had the typical reaction. I was charmed. I wanted him to like me. Yes, his eyes did bore into me. He did exude animal magnetism as though just the two of us were alone together in the universe and we could just settle down for a long, intimate chat. What if I met him at the lobby of the Hotel Malaysia? I pride myself on having an excellent shit detector, but I'm not sure it would have worked for me at the age and was such a brilliant psychopath. End quote.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was very interesting. I wanted to include it. And so after all was said and done, Charles had his 12-ish year sentence in prison. And as like over those 12 years, he was, getting additional years, but also things were being overturned. Weird. It's kind of complicated, but essentially a 12-year sentence. Okay. Now, the first thing he did was dig up dirt on the guys running the prison. He had gotten his hands on a very tiny tape recorder, and he recorded a number of the guards and prison officials talking about violations that they were involved with. He took the evidence, he got a meeting with the superintendent of the prison, and he essentially blackmailed him. And by doing this, he was able to secure himself the best possible prison conditions that anyone's ever heard of. Charles actually began working with the superintendent and making a bunch of money. I really don't understand what exactly they were doing, but I know he was like working with lawyers and like convincing certain prisoners to go with certain lawyers and like getting kickbacks for things. Charles had a color TV, he had a typewriter, and according to one of the guards, he had twice weekly appointments to have sex with Marie Andre in the superintendent's office. Charles,
how's he getting all this?
Because he blackmailed the superintendent, and the superintendent was basically like, it was so bad that he was like, if this tape gets out, like we're all fired. So they just let him do whatever he wanted. Charles, of course, had a bunch of women from all over the place come to meet him, and he had relationships with a few of them. There was like, one was a lawyer from somewhere, and she thought that, she just like started dating him. Another girl was this, I think she was an American girl who had a psychology degree from like Berkeley or something, or UCLA. and she just like was convinced that she could change him. It's very typical.
Come on.
Yeah. So great group of ladies. So Charles pretty much had everything going for him in prison, and his sentence was only 12 years. But the only real problem was that after his release, he knew he would get extradited back to Thailand for the murders of Teresa, Vitaly, Cocky, and Hank.
Okay.
He had admitted guilt on these cases. He'd been talking to people constantly, like this book was being written. And so it was no question that if he was sent back to Thailand, he would be tried, convicted, and most likely executed. Thailand was pretty loosey-goosey with their shooting people and stuff. So that was a big concern for him.
Yeah.
He thought about breaking out of prison, but he just didn't feel like being a fugitive. And at this point, his face was so recognizable, it would not be easy. So here is what this man did to solve his problem.
Okay, let's hear it.
On March 17th, 1986, 2 ex-prisoners who had recently been released arrived at the prison with a bunch of food and goodies. It was Charles's birthday. Both of these men had relationships with Charles while they were in prison. The food was brought to the superintendent's office. Obviously, they brought in Charles and a bunch of the other wardens, and they ate it and had a nice little birthday celebration for dear Charles. Charles at one point got up and said he was going to get some of his other friends to come celebrate. And when he returned to the office, all the prison wardens were beginning to pass out. The food had been laced with chloral hydrate and Medazepam. For anybody who's interested, chloral hydrate is a medication that they use to calm people before surgery. It's like a hypnotic. And then Medazepam is used for treatment of anxiety and panic disorders. And it's used during alcohol withdrawal treatments. Anyway, the mix led them to pass out.
God.
So all the guards were passed out, and Charles and some of his accomplices tied them up and duct taped their mouths. And then they took one of the guards with them, propped him up in the front passenger seat of the car with his arm sticking out of the car, so that they wouldn't draw any suspicion. And as they were leaving, like the guards that they had passed on the way in were all passed out. I guess like the guys gave them some food as they came in.
Okay.
So no one to stop them. Once they got out, they dumped the warden on the side of the road. And it was only 15 minutes later that guy was found by a rickshaw driver. Everyone was on alert. Roadblocks were posted. The media instantly started talking about it. And so everyone was like freaking out. So like Charles Sobhraj got out again. Jesus Christ.
Yes, seriously.
So
like again.
Yeah. So a 21-man task force was assembled to go undercover as tourists to track down Charles. And on April 6th, which was Charles's actual birthday, by the way, they successfully took him down in the middle of a wedding in Goa.
He was at a wedding?
Yeah, he was just chilling at a wedding. Charles was back in prison, and all of his luxuries were stripped away. The old superintendent who he had blackmailed was fired, and he no longer had anything over the new prison staff. Charles was given another 10 years for this attempted escape. Okay. But this was actually exactly what Charles wanted, because this way, by the time he was released from prison in India, the statute of limitations on the murders in Thailand would be up. So he would not be extradited. So he served
that.
Yes. So he served the remainder of his sentence safely in the Indian prison, and he was never tried for his crimes in Bangkok.
Okay.
What the fuck?
He just gets away with everything.
But goddamn, yeah. Anyway, so on February 17th, 1997, at age 52, Charles was released from prison, free and clear of all charges. He returned to Paris and started talking with journalists and engaging with people. He was kind of like treated as a celebrity, and he was loving it. He was now married to a Chinese woman with who he was having another baby. And for 10 years, Charles continued to participate in documentaries, do interviews for a fee. And it seems he did participate in some petty crimes. And there's also a lot of stuff, which I think we'll get into, that's all, we don't know what he did, but I'll get into it. He continued to write letters to Richard and Julie, writers of this book, who were living in Australia at the time. And they said that during those 10 years, he hinted at being involved with the Taliban and doing some like arms dealings and stuff. According to the BBC, Charles sold the rights to his story to a French producer for $15 million. The intention was to do a book and a movie, neither of which came to fruition. There was an Indian movie that got made about him, though. I'm not sure how popular it was, but that happened. So then, for reasons to this day that nobody still can understand, Charles traveled to Kathmandu, Nepal, which was the only country where he was still a wanted man. That's the only place where those murders were still an open case. Okay. A journalist noticed him and then notified authorities. And he was later found gambling in a casino, and he was promptly arrested on September 13th, 2003 for the murder of American tourist Connie Bronsage.
Oh, finally.
Charles claimed that he had never been to Kathmandu, and he tried to talk his way out of it, but Herman Nippenberg, Herman got wind of the situation, and he immediately dug out all his files from the basement that he kept on Charles. He sent over everything he had, and it was a huge help to the investigators more than 30 years after the fact. Charles received a life sentence for the murder, but made many appeals over the years, usually citing human rights violations through the UN. In 2008, Charles was back in the press for marrying his lawyer's 20-year-old daughter.
Stop. How old was he?
2008. He is, okay, so he got out when he was 52. And then this is 10 years later is 2007. So he's 63.
Marrying a 20-year-old?
Yes. And
wow.
Here I have this like small interview with her.
He's so caring to the people around him. So that again grew more in love with him. So like every day I love him more. So knowing him every day, it's like a better thing I do. I spend more time. And yeah, at last finally, he did not even like ask me to marry. It was just decided. It was just like talk and glances. So we were quite ready, and yeah, we got engaged. And now like we don't have to talk about some like marriage settling. It is always there. And but yet we are planning for future that after his release, because we know that he's going to release soon. So we are going to marry under the French law in France all together. Being 20, I am mature enough to decide my own things, and I know what I'm good in. They cannot call me inexperienced or something they have quoted as naive girl, but I would say that I'm quite impressed about how they can think about it. But it's my opinion that he's a mature man with a mind. But age does not make a difference, because how do you quote a man is aged? He does not retard anything. He is active, he's fresh, his mind is always working, and every day he has something intelligent more to come up. So why not? So I'm happy with every day I have, and I love that we have certain gap. So I love this 45 years. I love it because like the more intensity on the age, it comes with the maturity, and I am always expected, and I am just obliged to be like him, to be the man of my life.
Oh my God. That's pretty crazy.
So she sounds like she's got a good head on her shoulders.
Yeah, she's like, I'm 20, I'm mature.
Yeah, it's like one thing I can say about literally every 20-year-old is no, you're not mature.
You're definitely not. Yeah.
And if you are, then like you probably had a really rough life.
She's like, age is just a number. No, it's really not.
Yeah, like it's a number, and like numbers are important.
It's really, yeah. Oh, are they still married?
I don't know. I don't know if they ever got married.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's like something that happens so often, is people wanting to marry murderers. So I shouldn't be surprised, but it's just like, really?
I think she thinks
you could pick anybody. Yeah, but he murdered people.
Yeah, I know exactly. Well, she's the daughter of his lawyer. So I don't know how that really plays into
Carla Homolka married the brother of her lawyer.
Yeah, it's like that's clearly how she met him and got close to him. But
yeah, that's a good way to, if you're a murderer, that's a really good way to meet somebody.
What lawyer is like, oh, I have this Charles Sobhraj, I'm defending, like,
yeah,
my 20-year-old daughter, want to come meet this fun man? Like,
yeah, any murderers like defense lawyer, it's like, you really want to get involved with this person now?
He sounds like a terrible lawyer because he probably believed that Charles was innocent when he's fucking clearly not.
Yeah, very blatantly, obviously guilty, but okay.
Anyway, so there's that.
Okay.
In 2014, Charles was also tried and convicted for the murder of Canadian tourist Laurent Carrier.
That's good.
For this murder, Charles received a 20-year sentence. Charles is currently 77 years old, almost 78 at this time, and he remains in prison in Nepal, where he belongs.
Yeah.
He's attempted to escape a few times.
Of course.
But he was unsuccessful, and he's under very strict supervision for that reason.
I would be shocked if he hadn't.
Yeah, exactly. It would not be on brand for him to not try to escape. Wow. Now, that's it. That's where he is now. But the big question remains is why? Why did he do this?
Because he's a sick motherfucker.
Yeah. And I think I want to talk a bit about like his claim that he worked for the Hong Kong drug trade. And that was that he was a hired hitman for low-level players. Some people buy this. Richard and Julie and I was
curious whether you did too.
So I don't think I buy it. Okay. It's like definitely possible, but I don't see any evidence for it. Richard and Julie end their book with a conversation between Julie and Herman Nippenberg. Richard had died at this point, and Julie had said that Richard always thought that it had made sense. Let me read from. There's a couple of things I want to read. And her and Richard thought that it made sense, this whole thing, but there was a couple questions that they were like, they were like 90% on like the fact that was what it was. But she went and spoke with Herman, and I will give you Herman's account and like his take on it, because I think it's
okay.
So I'm reading a quote from Herman from a quote from this book.
Okay.
So quote, "This claim strikes me as pure cant, for the simple reason that professional hitmen, from what I've seen of them, are skilled soloists who discreetly enter an area of operation. They lead a withdrawn existence in a respectable hotel and immediately get out or go undercover after doing their thing. It is completely self-evident to me that Sobhraj's flamboyant behavior meant that he would never be hired for a job like that. As we know, early on, he decided that his Indian father was to blame for his problems and that he should have revenge on him. His real father represented the wealth and privilege that he believed was rightfully his, but he also blamed and despised his French stepfather for being weak, damaged by war, and for being a cuckold, for having only modest financial means. And he believed that the French legal system had cheated him out of the many years of his youth, and this extended out to a hatred of Europeans in general. We can also look back to the stage of his childhood when the family was living in Dakar and Charles as a boy began his criminal career surrounded by his admiring siblings. My theory is that Sobhraj had invited the victims to join him, become part of the family, either as members in residence or as business partners, to smuggle gems or whatever else he was up to. By now, he had no doubt he could convince anyone to do anything, as he had Yannick, the ex-policeman, acting as his secretary. What if these kids had declined his offer? They wanted to get home for Christmas and so forth. Imagine the shock of finding out that his powers of persuasion weren't working and that his generous invitation to join his magical world were being turned down. Sobhraj was a person who grew older but never grew up, and who, on the basis of stifling his feelings, had merely suppressed his fears of rejection and abandonment. These fears were now being triggered when the kids he was so sure would want to join him refused. And so he saw these kids as inferiors. He felt cornered by them because he had opened up to them about his illegal activities and was now unable to control them. Also, he was incapable of rational judgment. So these people who were plaguing him with anxiety and imbuing him with self-doubt needed to be destroyed.
Okay.
So that's Herman's take on the matter. And Julie noted that she left by not being 100% convinced either way. She always thought of Charles as totally rational, killing people for their passports, which he needed to commit crimes. But Herman presented an entirely irrational explanation, which was like opposite to what she had thought. And just to end on too, Charles is known to be responsible for 12 murders, but many people think that there could be as many as 30 victims or more.
For sure. I would not be surprised.
Yeah. And then one more little thing. I did go to Reddit to check what people were saying.
Good old Reddit.
So there's one person who wrote this big comment, and I'll just read basically what it says. So Charles killed too many people and got away with it. He forged passports. He was a con artist, and he had secret relations with the local police, as shown in the series. In the series, they're talking about the BBC series, the Serpent.
Yes.
In reality, Charles was probably a CIA agent, and that's why he always got away with his crimes and escaped jail so many. I don't think I buy this, but this is interesting. Okay. Those countries are incredibly scary with strict capital punishment. Yet Charles was so confident and got away with so many crimes, even though he was born a stateless man of a non-white background. Charles himself admits that he worked for the CIA. He returned to Nepal due to his work with the CIA, and the agency ultimately betrayed him. And so he goes on to say, anyway, the CIA in that specific time period had a lot of interest in the region, as evidenced by the 1953 Iranian coup d'etat and 1979 Iranian Revolution and the conflicts in Afghanistan. There's no doubt that the CIA had agents in that region around the time Charles was murdering those people. Charles posed as a gem dealer and a drug dealer. The CIA had a lot of interest in the drug industry in that region, especially Afghanistan and Pakistan. Historically, many drug dealers in the region had close ties to the CIA. You don't have to be a conspiracy theory to join those dots. Wow. This is what somebody says. And they've linked a couple articles, which I'll link in here as well. But there was this one guy, and this was a complicated thing to look into, but there was a guy who Charles approached to have the guy write a book about him. And I think the guy ended up writing a book, or at least a manuscript, and that was the plot. And so then Charles started saying that was true. So he started talking about how he was hired by the CIA, and remember how I said that he was talking about how he was in doing business with the Taliban, and he was around in Iran and Afghanistan and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And it is true that the CIA was lurking about at that point and blah, blah, blah. I don't buy this.
Okay. I'm curious about that. I feel like lately everything is connected to the CIA. It's just hard to know, right?
Yeah, no, I watched a show recently. I never really knew too much about the CIA.
I still don't really. It's just that it seems like they were potentially involved in the drug trade when they were America's supposed to be so against drugs, but the CIA was smuggling drugs in, and
Snowfall. That's a serious.
What are they?
The CIA is fucked, pretty much. The CIA is crazy. Seem fucked. They operate they operate.
And MK Ultra, that's a CIA thing. It's really, you guys just experiment on random people? Okay.
The CIA just basically can do whatever the fuck they want as long as it's not on American soil. But they
scary.
So they do all this fucked up shit in all these other countries. But they're doing stuff for American interests. And so it's always possible that it could be the CIA, but it's also always convenient to blame things on the CIA for that reason.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just seems, from what I gather, Charles only started telling the story after that story had been made up by somebody else about him.
Right.
So
it's how often does that really happen? Right.
Yeah, that's where I stopped. That's where I was oh, okay. And I think Charles also likes to lie and make shit up.
For sure.
But I'll leave those articles there for other people to look at. I just thought I'd include it, since why the fuck not? Sure. But I think the biggest question is, to me, it seems like the two most plausible theories are either he was in some sort of involvement in some sort of drug trade and was a hitman, or it was more closer to Herman's theory. I'm more prone to believe Herman's theory. That seems to make more sense to me. I just don't buy that all these tourists that they were like actually involved drug dealers. I think some of them have been involved in like trading drugs and being little mules here and there. And that's why it made sense to make up that story after the fact. But there's also such a plethora of information about this case that maybe I'm missing something. But I am definitely more in the camp of Herman Knippenberg's theory.
Right.
Thoughts, opinions?
I have no idea. I feel like he kind of liked murdering. I don't know.
It does. Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Yeah, it does seem like he, oops, there goes my headphones. There's like way too much. I think one good point that Herman brings up is like, nobody would have hired this man to be a hitman. He's like, he's not, he wouldn't make a good hitman. He's way too flashy. He's way too like into himself and egotistical.
Yes.
They would meet him once and be like, no, not this guy.
Yeah. He's not a subtle.
He's skilled in his own way, but not for that type of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of, I feel really relaxed now being finished with four
true
episodes of that. It was a deep dive for me. It was a lot of Charles Sobhraj in my life.
Yeah, that is a very deep dive.
I really do recommend the BBC series. I know Herman Knippenberg consulted on it and he's done a bunch of interviews. He's still alive. He's the cutest little man. He's very sweet. He and Angela ended up getting a divorce. She's very prominent in the series and like their relationship, and she seems like a cool lady too. She went off and did her own thing, but he remarried and he's living in Australia. Now, Nadine is still around. Her and Remy got a divorce, unfortunately, which that's super sad because they were such like a power cool couple. But she's still around. I don't remember if she's still in Thailand, but she was like running. I'll have some photos of her. She's like really cute little lady, and I think she runs some sort of hotel or something.
Nice.
Yeah, and the series was really good, and it was like there's obviously some parts that they go a little theatrical on, but like it's very similar to the book.
Yeah, it's just basically like a real life movie.
Yeah, it's fascinating on its own. You really don't have to play it up much for it to be like really interesting and like a thriller.
Yeah, it's so extreme.
Yeah. And that's Charles Sobhraj for you.
Wow.
So please, everybody, let us know what you think. We've done a number of like 4-part series now. So like, let us know if you hate that, but probably we'll still keep doing it because I like it. We'll still
but the thing is, once you start reading, because certain cases there's not that much info out there, but when there is a lot, it's like you don't want to not put stuff in.
Yeah.
And then it just gets longer and longer.
Yeah, we're not a channel or a podcast that's just not getting like I like the details, so that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
If you're not into that, then please still watch. But yeah, please let us know what you think on our Instagram at Who's Knocking Podcast, on our Twitter at Who's Knocking Pod. Send us an email, hello@whosknockingpodcast.com.
Let us know what was your first crime case you learned about.
What did you get into true crime by? Do you even remember? I do. Hannah doesn't.
Yeah. I think it was Paradise Lost. I'm pretty sure it was.
Could have been. I remember we used to be into a lot of like witchy stuff. Like we used to hang out at chapters and like in the occult section. Like that's
but that's
where we started.
Yeah.
We were like really into like astrology and shit.
Shout out astrology.
Yeah, and just please remember to stay safe out there because you never know
who's knocking.
Bye. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew Cook.